Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday Wire. This week's episode is going to be focusing on the item in Terraria called the announcement box. As you see, the rows of them down here. The announcement box is an item that allows you to basically write a message. You can right-click it and hit edit, and you can type whatever you like here. And then whenever an impulse gets fired to that announcement box, it actually brings it up down in the lower left corner in the same place you'd see like the notification for like a blood moon or a boss spawning or something like that. So it allows you to make kind of worldwide notifications in your world. And so what we're doing today is we set up a bunch of these announcement boxes, and you can see they're all kind of, or most of them are kind of focused on like when herbs bloom. And then these ones over here are for the phases of the moon. So what this system does is it relies on a day and night sensor to track what time it is in the day, basically. So if we look at the wiring, the day sensor here gets wired up to things like a message saying daytime has arrived and day bloom is blooming, and moon glow is no longer blooming. So whenever it turns to day, day bloom will start to bloom, moon glow stops blooming, and so on. And so I'll quickly run through each of the announcement boxes and what each one's notifying of, and then I'll kind of go through what this big cluster here on the left is and what this little cluster is on the right, how they work. So the nighttime sensor is hooked up to the blue wire on this side, so you can see that's when day bloom stops blooming when it turns to night. Fire blossom no longer blooms once it hits 7:30. Night has arrived, of course, and moon glow will start to bloom. So those are the basic herbs. Now the one that's a little bit different here, it's the one with the yellow wire. You can see Fire Blossom is blooming. That one is a little bit more of a pain because Fire Blossom starts blooming at 3:45 p.m., which is a really unusual time. There's not really a sensor that's close to it that'll allow you to detect it. And so what we have set up here is when it turns to daytime, it begins this sequence, and you can see it wraps around row by row and connects each row with the red wire on the outside. And these are hooked up to diodes with 5-second timers. So it's 12 across and 11 rows up. And so each row will take an hour in game to complete, because a second in real life, a second on the timer is equal to a minute of in-game time. And so this will pass 11 hours starting at 4:30 a.m. when the day starts, which puts you at 3:30 by the time you get up here to the very last diode in the row. And then I have 3 more up here to get us from 3:30 to 3:45. Each one of these takes 5 seconds to complete. So basically this whole cluster takes it starts at 4:30 a.m. when the daylight or the daytime sensor gets stripped. And then these 5-second delays will take it all the way up to the point of 3:45 p.m., at which point it comes down here and lets the world know that Fire Blossom is in bloom. So if anybody needs Fire Blossom, they should return to base and get those harvested while the seeds are still there. So that covers the left side here, and we'll show that in action here in a minute. We'll let nighttime roll around and let you kind of watch it go through the process as it goes through daytime. So we'll go a little bit more in depth about the timer system here and the delay system in just a minute, but I want to take a second to talk about the right-hand side, which keeps track of the phases of the moon. Now, this one's a little bit unique in that it uses a kind of a special kind of wiring structure, and what it is, it's a Boolean left shift, which sounds complicated if you've never used it before, but basically all it is, you can see this, basically ignore the top row of faulty circuits, and just take a look at the bottom row in their lamps. So you can see one of them is off, and that one corresponds to the sign right before it. So basically when daytime rolls around, we're going to see it here in a few minutes. When daytime rolls around, it's going to fire a signal to this little circuit here, and it's basically going to push this lamp over one, and it's going to push this lamp over one. And all that does is it helps us keep track of which phase of the moon it is. So when the daytime hits, that's when the moon phase shifts. And so every time, this is wired to the daylight sensor, the daytime sensor. And so every time a new day rolls around, that sensor fires and shifts the marker over to the left one and fires the corresponding announcement box to let the world know what moon phase it is. Now, in our actual build, like I said, all my Wednesday wires I want to build into an actual base. In the actual base that we're going to take a look at here in just a few, the messages are a little bit more expanded to give everybody in the world, like, the fishing power. So you can see nighttime just hit there. You can see night has arrived. You got moonglow blooming, fire blossoms, fire blossom and day bloom are no longer blooming. So those are the types of announcements that pop up. So with this moon phase shift, what I wanted to do was be able to kind of give everybody in the world a little bit of an indication of like the fishing power change, the items that the NPCs sell based on the phase, things like that. So in the actual base, you're going to see a lot more message boxes or announcement boxes, and those will give us a little bit more information. But I'm going to speed things up here so that we can get to the daytime sensor so we can see this whole thing start to work. All right, we are here in our final base world for this Wednesday wire. And before we go take a look at it, I wanted to break down a little delay structure here that I have set up just to make it a little bit more clear. It's based off of the same wiring diagram that we looked at for the Fire Blossom timer to get to 345. So you can see I have a logic gate, a lamp, and a timer next to it. But in this case, we have two announcement boxes between them. And I mentioned that the moon phase announcements I was going to do a little bit more complicated in this world. And so what I've done is I've hooked up a delay to each of the announcements for the moon phases so they don't all just spam the lower left corner at once and kind of trickle in to give all the information about what items are being sold, what enemies are around, what your fishing power change is, just anything that is related to the moon phases gets displayed. So real quick, we'll take a look at the wiring, and you can see here I just have a switch hooked up. It goes through the first announcement box, which I just typed in the word sign, labeled it number 1, and over here sign number 2. So the screen wire fires and then trips the announcement box, so we'll see the announcement pop up as soon as we flip the switch. That's going to light the lamp to the logic gate, which is then going to turn on the timer. That timer is then going to wait for 5 seconds. You can switch these out for 3-second or 1-second timers, whatever you'd like. That's going to fire a signal back into the lamp to turn itself off, and it's also going to fire a signal straight through another announcement box, and this one works the exact same way. It's that diode structure that we talked about, and then finally it just flips off the light. So let's take a look at that in action real quick. So we're going to flip the switch, turns it on, makes the announcement down here, lights up the timer, and after 5 seconds it pulses this one, fires the second announcement, and then finally once this one goes off it'll turn out the light. So now that we've taken a look at that, what we'll do is we'll run over here and take a look at our actual build. So this is what we have here. I'm actually going to hop outside so we can kind of fly around and actually see it here. So we built a little bit of a clock tower. Kind of made sense to me that since this thing is built so heavily around timing and day and night cycles, it made sense that we build kind of a clock tower base. And you can see this thing's actually running right now because it's hooked up to our day and night sensors down here at the bottom. So let's take a look at this giant cluster of wire here. It's wired exactly the same as the last one for the Fire Blossom sensor. So you can see when it turns to day, it starts this big long chain of timers that basically just spaces us out until 3:45 p.m. when it ultimately fires this announcement box saying Fire Blossom is blooming. It's a lot of wiring for not a great result, but it's kind of a cool little feature to have in your base, I think. Now the other things that are wired up here, this other yellow wire crosses through that logical left shift that we were talking about, which controls the moon phases. So that's going to set in motion the process to announce what moon phase it is. The other side of this wire just goes up and makes general like daytime announcements, like it's daytime and day bloom, moonglow not blooming, deathweed not blooming, things like that. Now, the part that's different up here, you'll see I actually have announcement boxes that go through the different pieces of the moon phase. So we'll just start here with first quarter, which is our leftmost, just in the wiring diagram, it's the first one here. So it announces the moon phase, it'll wait 5 seconds. Then you can see it tells you that the painter's selling through the window painting, the steampunker sells the jetpack, the clothier is selling the cowboy costume. I did note hard mode items with HM, just so that that's obvious, and that there's not really a way to detect if you're in hard mode as far as I know. So I just designated those as hard mode, so if you're not in hard mode yet, you know to ignore them. That fires down through the yellow wire and then starts a chain down to the stylus, selling time hair dye, everything that the skeleton merchant sells, and then it just trickles off here and shuts itself down. So all 8 phases of the moon are wired the same way. You can see those are the green wires that lead up here, and they have various kind of chains. This isn't laid out the best, but it's about as close as I could do without spending too much time, honestly, on it. You can reorganize this to suit your messaging system first. What I'd suggest, I made like a Google sheet and just wrote out all of the different messages that I wanted and what activated them. Made it a little bit easier to kind of organize this stuff, or at least plan it out, know that I have enough announcement boxes and the space in the build. So everything works exactly the same. This chain of announcements is all handled by the logical left shift that moves one cycle over every time daytime hits when the moon phase changes. So I'm going to just kind of sit in the middle of this thing and speed things up so that we can let some time pass. You can see the fire blossom message, you see the moon phase shift, see the nighttime messages, all that good stuff. So we're just going to hang out in here and speed things up. Alright, so we're getting close to 3:45, which is when we're going to see the fire blossom blooming. So while we're waiting for that, I'm really interested to see what other kinds of things could be announced in these boxes. I was trying to think of different things that might be useful to a world. The thing is it can only be fired, as far as I know, the daylight or daytime and nighttime sensors are the only ones that really give you a control over times of days and things like that. So if you can think of other uses for other sensors or anything like that that might lead to more announcements or better ideas for that, leave it in the comments below. I'm really interested to see what kind of thoughts you guys have on this one. So you can see we're in the home stretch here, so we got this one, and this one left, and then it's going to fire this guy right here. We should see it right down in the bottom left corner for us. And one more. There you go. Fire blossom is blooming. So these ones have delays on them just because of kind of symmetry of build. So some of them, the timers are really unnecessary, don't need to be there. But just for the sake of symmetry, I just left all of them in place. So I'm going to speed things up really quick for just a couple minutes so that we can see the nighttime message, and then we should be good to go. Alright, so we're getting close to nighttime here, so we'll go ahead and take a look and watch for the nighttime sensors to make sure everything's working as intended. So it should let us know that day bloom's no longer blooming. It should tell us, what else? It should tell us nighttime's here. And there you go, so night has arrived. And it's going to wait 5 seconds, it's going to tell us moon glow is blooming. That's right, of course, moon blooms at night. Day bloom's no longer blooming. And fire blossom's no longer blooming because it's past 7:30 now. So there you go, there's the nighttime cycle, so we're going to speed it up one more time here. Slime falling from the sky is not my announcement box, of course, but we're going to speed it up till morning here, and once morning arrives, we'll watch the moon phase shift and look at all the information presented then. Alright, so it is almost daytime here, and we are going to get to see the Boolean logical left shift move over one cycle, and you can see it's currently a waning crescent. It's about to change here at 4:30 a.m. And we'll get to see whichever sequence it fires. To be honest, I don't remember which one comes after waning crescent. But keep an eye down here in the lower left corner as it turns right about meow. Perfect. And so you can see daytime has arrived, the moon phase is a new moon, and you can see that matches what our cell phone says. -10 to fishing power, day bloom is blooming, moon glow is no longer blooming. There are swarms of demon eyes, fireflies, wraiths, and wandering eyes, lightning bugs in hard mode. The painter, underground reward is being sold, deathweed's no longer blooming, steampunker has the jetpack, the clothier has the princess set in hard mode. The skeleton merchant, if you find him, is selling strange brew, bone arrows, blue counterweights, and the format C in hard mode. So there you have it. Each moon cycle will fire the corresponding events that are found on the Terraria wiki page for moon phase. So that's it for this week's Wednesday Wire. If you guys have questions about the build or have ideas of how you could use this in your world, Leave in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more like this. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next week. Good to have early. Oh, the ice. Oh, the dart traps. Oh no. That legitimately scared me. I jumped when those things fired. Oh my gosh. Am I gonna die from this? I hope not.